Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting. I've just got to read out a prepared script at the start. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to be filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Okay. Okay, so we have a large agenda this evening. So I'm just going to ask people to be as brief as possible when making points, and for officers when they're presenting papers to provide a very brief summary and just highlight any key particular points, and so we can move on to this discussion. So on to agenda item 1, the appointment of substitutes. Do we have any?
Chair, no, we have no substitutes with us tonight.
Thank you. Item number 2, do we have any declarations of interest? Louise?
I'm an allotment holder in Worcester.
Owen? Any more? Okay. So we have some public participation this evening. We have a maximum of 15 minutes, with each speaker being allocated 5 minutes. That's totally. Julian, are you okay to introduce our speakers for me?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Yeah, we have 3 speakers effectively tonight, or 4, and yes, everybody has up to 5 minutes speaking time. The first person we have is Paul Snooks from Worcester Environmental Group. The second person we have is Mr. Patrick Allfrey, and then thirdly we have Councillor Richard Udall and Councillor Robert Norfolk, who are speaking on behalf of residents to present a petition. So they're speaking in that particular capacity in the public participation.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you all tonight. There's 2 or 3 issues that the Worcester Environmental Group would like to raise. I went to the Policy and Resource Committee and talked to them about we don't have any wildlife rangers anymore. And I've spoken to several. I'm me now, am I? Yep, okay. Sorry, it was me first, wasn't it? Yeah. So we don't have any wildlife rangers anymore. We've declared a biodiversity emergency, and I'd like to urge this committee to go to the Policy and Resource and ask for additional funding for that to happen. I understand there's a possibility of when one of the operatives leaves, you could get somebody in that would have the expertise, and it wouldn't cost that much extra to have somebody working with you on that. Also, I understand from the 2 officers, Mark Corrall and Mark Bayliss, that they're going to be doing a lot more cutting and collecting of verges, so that we'll have a lot more wildflowers throughout the city. That's going to require more cut and collect machines than we have at the moment. And again, I would urge this committee to consider putting to the Policy and Resources Committee that you purchase more of those. And actually, because you will be cutting much less frequently, you will be spending to save. Over a 5-year period, you'll actually save more money. by spending money now to do that. And lastly, I'd just like to, I've talked to 2 or 3 councillors here about this already. We are looking to plan, we are planning to have a Wild About Worcester route, a 12-mile route around the city connecting all our green spaces. And there'll be more information coming out. We're hoping to have a meeting with all interested parties within the next several weeks to look at the details of that. It'll be a fantastic opportunity for wildlife to flourish along with our community. So looking forward to engaging with you about that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can we have our next public speaker now, please, Mr. Alfrey?
Oh, has done that. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm here unofficially. Well, I feel I'm here on behalf of the residents of St John's, and in particular the tenants of the Windsor Avenue allotment site. As I think probably most of you are aware, the city decided to develop some housing in the area, and they took over the recreational area that, whilst it wasn't anything terribly special, it was appreciated by numerous people in the area. It was about the only asset that I can think of this particular district of Worcester. But and I think we've been treated appallingly. The way the allotments have been treated, we were promised access throughout the building period through the second entrance, which was denied because the ownership, quote, the ownership of the property had transferred from the developer to the builder. So their obligations were no longer valid. The area has been let to go to rack and ruin since this was taken on. The building, the 106 contract was, I don't think, performed in any respect. Just about every condition in there was breached. The allotments have had a water supply, an adequate water supply, which went through the area that was sold. The legal officers presumably never entered into any agreement because the developers said that they were not going to have our water supply going through their site. So they cut it off and put a secondary pipe around the outside, which they say was like for like, but they know very well it wasn't. It restricted the flow to about 1/3 of what was done. This has been going on, as Richard will be able to confirm, for 16, 17 months now, and we've got nowhere. The track in the place was damaged by the contractors going through there. That's been redone by the property department, I believe, the council's employees, and it's been put down with the most unsuitable material. The growth of weed is growing back in the centre, and the material used is what you put in the bed of a construction, not on the surface. There are rocks there with sharp edges, 1.5 by 2 inch, and no one's going to want to cut that. It's got to be resurfaced with a proper fine thing and done properly. I was assured by Richard that it would be just as good as it was before, and I can tell you it is not. The gates have been replaced. We were promised gates that were going to have integral locks and be 100% with keypads built in, so none of this messing about with combination locks was necessary. They put in two new gates at one end and replaced a vehicle gate at the other end with a pedestrian gate. They are both
We've got 1 minute left, so if you want to move towards your summary, you've got a minute
I've
left.
done my time, have I?
Have 1 more minute, but summarise.
Right, I've lost my thread now. I was originally asked to go to a meeting with the developers, and I went along to the developers' premises in Progress Road, and we were told that it was going to be a great benefit to the thing. The purpose of that meeting was simply to get a letter or an email from the then site representative, which they could then turn around and say was the allotment holders were happy with the situation and had no objections to it. That was a total fraud. And I will provide you personally with a link to a web page of a Freedom of Information request which you can study, and you will see just how corrupt that was. That done the time? Okay.
Well, thank you for coming this evening. I understand you've provided some more detail with emails to council officers, and I'll ask officers to view those and get back to you with them.
The way he's been treated by the council officers.
We need to draw a line on the public participation.
Thank you.
There, thank you. So can we move on to our final public participation? Is it yourself, Richard, or you and Robin?
Yes, it's me, Chair. And can I first of all thank Patrick Alfrey for his comments here this evening. He has suffered a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm grateful for his comments. The issues are live and are real at this allotment site, and I would hope that with his help and with the help of others, we can resolve them. But that's not what I'm speaking about here tonight. Chair, there have been 5 break-ins in allotment sites in the west of Worcester in the past week, with Albury Road, Windsor Avenue and Bromwich Road allotment sites all targeted, with over £4,000 worth of equipment stolen. All sheds, 50 sheds on one site were broken into, and considerable damage has been caused. I have in front of me a petition of just under 100 people which have signed, asking for an improvement in security on our allotment sites. It's backed up with a letter which I've received from the police, who in my presence, who did an inspection on the site, and I've suggested a number of actions which would make the sites more secure, including removal and replacement of the gates and current locks, which in their words are not fit for purpose. So I would summarily ask you, Chair, to agree to accept this petition on behalf of residents of St John's and allotment users, look at the request from the police and what they've requested, and I would ask for a report to come back to our next committee on how we can implement the suggestions from the police and how we can improve security in allotments in St John's and across the city. I know allotment security has always been an issue and always probably will be an issue, but it's at its time now when it's at the greatest problem that I've ever seen in my life as a councillor, which is over 30 years. And I think there is a distinct problem which we need to address. So I'll pass the petition along the line and ask you to consider placing this item on the agenda for our next meeting, so we can determine what resources are needed in order to improve security to make it adequate for our tenants. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, we're on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Does anybody have any comments? We'll just go page by page. Page 1. page 2, page 3, 4, page 5. Okay, well, seems good. I'll sign those off as an accurate record of the last meeting. With agreement with the Vice Chair, we're going to have a little bit of a change around in the running order this evening for reasons which may or may not be obvious. So we're going to ask, we're going to move to agenda items 10 and 11 first, and ask Ruth and David if you want to come forward and present.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you, Chair. So the first paper is the Biodiversity Action Programme. This paper follows on from the declaration of a biodiversity emergency last year. The paper outlines a little bit about the current status of biodiversity across the city at the moment, along with our partners and our identified priorities. From the discussions that we've had in developing this action programme, it's been clear that we need to focus on what the City Council can do with our own land. We obviously have a large proportion of the green space in the city within either our ownership or our management, and so that needs to be where our focus is at the moment. The report proposes allocating £20,000 to deliver some of the actions that are outlined in the action programme in Appendix 1. And that £20,000 is to be spent as needed within the range of projects, with discussion with the Chair of Environment Committee. That £20,000 is proposed to come from the budget, which was identified for delivering the environmental sustainability strategy. That was a budget of £100,000, and so far to date, £20,000 has been allocated, which was to the environmental community grants. Now, that budget was approved in July by this committee, so it would take us up to a total of £40,000 allocated from the £100,000. I won't take you through all of the proposals of the individual actions, but as you'll see, they do cover a wide range of actions, but with that priority of improving biodiversity across our own sites, going through our management plans, for instance, to ensure that we are identifying and maximising all opportunities to enhance and improve biodiversity within those sites. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
I'll open it up to the endorsement, and I think it's the right strategy for us to be focusing when we've got 24 sites across the. So, if there's no questions, no comments on the floor, then are we happy to approve the recommendations at 1.1 and 1.2? Favour? Yeah. Okay, move on to agenda item 11, please.
Thank you, Chair. The second paper I have for you this evening is our progress update for the Environmental Sustainability Strategy and Action Plan. So again, just to recap, this followed on from the declaration of a climate emergency, which was in July 2019. We then approved the Environmental Sustainability Strategy. And following that, just earlier this year in March, the action plan was approved. As part of that action plan, it was proposed that we would present 6 monthly reports to this committee, and this is the first of those 6 monthly reports. As you can see from the report, there's been significant progress made on a number of the actions, and I've also included carbon emission figures. Obviously, the carbon emission is only sort of one aspect of our sustainability strategy, but it is a very sort of big proportion. Both the carbon neutral city council theme and the carbon neutral Worcester theme are two of the major themes within the strategy. And there's good reductions been seen for carbon emissions, both for our own operations and buildings, and then also for the city. This report is simply for noting, but each theme has an overview, and then you will also see in Appendix 1, you have the update from our performance management system, where all of the actions are recorded and monitored. Thank you, Chair. Again, obviously happy to take.
Okay, thank you for that, and this shows that there's sort of broad range of activity.
Thanks. Can I just point out on ESS 8 on page 4 of the report regarding active travel, I think it might be worth adding that at Health and Wellbeing Committee next week, we actually have a report coming regarding having a budget proposal to recruit an active travel officer. So it might be worth adding that there as well, just to show that we really are committed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A few points from me. First of all, just noting the reduction in emissions from the City Council's own operations. You cited a reduction that's come from us buying low carbon electricity. Do we know if we've made any reduction in our buildings besides that? Have we made any actual fabric improvements or efficiency savings?
Point 4.2 does talk about the reduction in fuel, so not for buildings, but there is a reduction in the fuel usage by the council fleet and operations. However, gas usage has gone up, and it's worth just drawing your attention to the fact that the crematorium does represent 74% of the total emissions from gas usage. So whilst this building uses a lot of gas, actually it is dwarfed by the crematorium. In terms of the emissions and usage of electricity, I would have to find that out for you. Actually, because we've zero rated it, it does mean that I haven't had the focus on the usage of electricity.
Super, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very good point. I also note that, of course, anything in our operations was masked by COVID, so addressed the effect of our change. I just want to say I liked the point about recognising that some of the services delivered by the council or on behalf of the council aren't included in that work, but there's future work plans to take them into account. That's really good, thank you. And also there was a nod to Freedom Leisure's efforts. I remember them reporting to us at Communities Committee last year, and they've done some superb work to reduce their emissions and try to work. So nod to them for that work. Good. In terms of the measures the work we've done with the Green Homes Grant and other central government funding, in particular in improving buildings, you mentioned it's been very difficult to plan capacity and to scale our work because there's been some unpredictability there. We now have some foresight of a lot of new government funding coming online next year as a result of the heat and building strategy. What do we need to do now to make sure that we can bid at the highest possible level for those central government funds and get the most impact in Worcester? And does that potentially mean more headcount?
So in terms of the Green Homes Grant, we have bid already for funding for the financial year from April 2022 through until March 2023. So we were part of a consortium bid with the Midlands Energy Hub. That was actually a sustainable warmth competition. So it included both the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme and also the new scheme, which is the Home Upgrade Scheme, or HUGS. And they are now split essentially. So whereas with our current iterations of the Green Homes Grant, it is for both on-gas and off-gas properties. From April next year, it has been split into these two schemes. So the Green Homes Grant will be for on-gas properties only, and the HUG scheme will be for off-gas properties only. So a bid went into the Midlands Energy Hub for that funding, or through the Midlands Energy Hub through to BASE for that funding. It does include a significant amount of funding for local authority officer time or resources. So potentially it may be an opportunity there to be able to look at headcount. We are expecting to hear about that soon, so we can then plan. Whereas we haven't, as we said, had that kind of insight in future funding. Hopefully, if we hear in the next few weeks, we will know what resources we've got from April. I don't know about any of the other funding at the moment. I don't know there is more planned from the government in terms of heat pumps. That's what look for us as a local.
I guess the rest of my comments are probably addressed directly to you, Chair, rather than via you to officers. But there is going to be a lot more funding coming online from government that we will be able to access. I ask that you ensure that we keep up to speed with that, and as we set our budget for next year, we're ready to increase that capacity if it's. Also, I know that we've been discussing ways that we might make some more ambitious strides towards the carbon neutral Worcester element of this strategy, where the current actions are probably sized to have a relatively low impact. So also, if we can kind of keep a pulse on those and try and organise some papers for additional action.
Completely happy with that. I mean, it's always been my view that we need to maximise the use of grants and limited resources. Get funding from central government and beyond. Carry on having a towards that plan.
Super, thank you very much, Chair. And through you, thanks to Ruth for accepting my grilling then and her hard work. It's another piece of excellent work. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions on the So I'll be happy to just note this report. Okay, thank you very much, Ruth. So we're now back on to the agenda in order with agenda item number 5, which is setting of the budget for the next financial year. And over to the Director of Finance.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. This is the second stage in our setting the budget for the coming year. The first being the all members meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, in which I set out the overall context for the council's budget, talked about the direction of travel, and identified the totality of resources which we have worked with and the context in terms of our revenue budgets going forward. This report is, for those who are familiar with the process, you'll recognise as the start of this budget discussion for this committee. For those of you who are new to this process, this is a stage when we simply set out all of the funding which is within the remit of this committee. A significant amount falls in the Environment Committee, and particularly the levels of income go high. Well, so there's a large area of the council's budget responsibilities fall here. The Appendix 1 shows those. They are there just for information, to prompt thinking about whether or not the changes in budgets which are happening over time are right, whether we're going in the right direction, or members feel that we need to take a different tack. As part of this process, we have an income and efficiency plan, which is set out in Appendix 2, which shows we've made good progress in some areas. During the year, we've looked at some and said, well, those aren't going to go forward. So we've got a slightly different picture there. We might want to think about future income and efficiency targets. That's something that we discuss as we go through the budget. Appendix 3 looks at the bigger picture in terms of the capital programme, the wide range of things, and the projects which fall within the remit of the and Appendix 4 shows those in a slightly more focused way. One of the considerations for members here is, are those still the right projects? Are there still things we're committed to? Are there other things which we need to bring into the longer term planning process rather than our revenue budgets for coming up? And this year there's an additional appendix, which is Appendix 5. I'm sorry, no, Appendix 5 is the normal one. That's the city plan projects. So those are things where we've decided in the past that we want to prioritise. We've put our reserves towards those. Again, if there's any potential funding left of those, we may free those up to do different things, or you may be, as the recommendation is, content. Those are the projects we're working on. The additional appendix is Appendix 6. At the outturn stage for last year, we identified a surplus and allocated that to a number of activities, many of which fall within the Environment Committee. And that appendix gives some indication of progress to date. The one at the bottom shows no progress to date, the subsidised parking to attract visitors. That's going forward through the Christmas period. Yeah, so spend will be incurred later on in the financial year for that one. So that's the context for the committee. The process now is that we, if members wish, bring forward ideas here, or as it's designed to be, that there are things that you want to discuss in terms of future budget items, then come to me and we'll have a discussion about them, or to Lloyd or other officers, and then we'll see if we can work up those proposals into something more detailed, and then we come to the January committee. At the point we make decisions about what we want to take forward through. So this is really just about context, about kicking off that discussion for a period over the next few weeks, while we firm those ideas up into something. So we'll revisit and reconvene in January. And are there any questions about the process or any thoughts that members have today? Then discuss those.
Okay, thank you, Shane. So I just want to share some of the items that I've discussed with officers as potentials for next year. I think some won't come as much as a surprise. Our regular visitor, Paul Snooks, has previously mentioned the cut and collect mower. So we've made inquiries regarding that. So that again, it would be a potential capital item with some spend and save elements if we're currently renting one. This year, as Shane mentioned, we've had some additional budget which has been used. A large proportion of it's been used to keep the higher standards of cleanliness in the city centre, and I certainly would like to know what elements of that are the sort of most effective, and we would like to continue to maintain the high standards that we actually need for the city centre. Another one that's raised a few times now is raised again this evening, was the upskilling environmental operations teams, so that they've got in-house biodiversity and sort of ranger type skill sets to help with the managing our biodiversity, our wildlife, our meadows and verges. So again, like officers to look at that. And then I also want to make sure that we've got appropriate resourcing in our neighbourhood teams, which was subject to that have been around years ago. We put some one-off funding in to fully resource the neighbourhood place working teams, and so just want to make sure that those teams are properly resourced. So I'm going to open the floor if anyone's got any questions for Shane.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise this with your permission under any other business, but I think it's an opportune moment to do it now, rather than talk about it when we're later on the agenda. And I have in front of me an email from an officer of the City Council about proposals for toilet facilities at St John's Cemetery. As you all know, St John's Cemetery is a major cemetery, and it's still got a lot of use available to it for future interments there. There are a lot of visitors who go to that cemetery, visit the graves and pay their respects, and there's no public toilets there. Well, there are, but they're closed. I understand that a capital expenditure has come out at a raise of approximately £50,000 with a revenue ongoing cost of £14,000 a year to fund their reopening and to provide services for our own staff on the site. I do wonder whether this is something which we can consider at a future meeting about how we can improve facilities. I don't think we need to do anything super duper. I don't think we need to do anything special, but a facility provision there is required. It is needed. People are missing it. We're not necessarily providing it for the people who are actually living in a cemetery. It's for the people who are visiting it, and their needs are vital and important. And they're currently telling me they come long distances and can't actually spend very long there because of the call of natures which they request, which they need. So maybe some consideration at our next meeting on that as a budget item to improve the toilet facilities and staff facilities at St John's Cemetery. It would certainly be worthwhile consideration and worthwhile expenditure, and would return dividends to us.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Louise? Sorry, no, it was Andy, so you.
With regards to Appendix 6, I don't know whether these are things that are already ongoing, but the one about enforcement of parking outside the city centre, the lease of one small vehicle for a 12-month period, is there a reason why enforcement officers outside the city centre need a vehicle? Why couldn't they? Might be cheaper for budget spend, better for the environment.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think we were conscious of getting on with that. There was a political steer and a political priority for us to do more enforcement outside of the city centre area. And we just thought that was a better option right at the outset of that, just to get a vehicle in and get officers at those locations quickly. But we're not saying that's a long-term thing. That was just to get the...
Neil?
Can you hear me now? 3.4, paragraph 3.4, goes the end of page 1 to the beginning of page 2. First sentence is given that the council faces a reduction in its future funding. Just wondered whether there's an idea about how much funding we're going to lose for next year. Is it possible to give a roundabout figure?
Also, there's also been a budget announcement. Jane will know.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, perhaps if we refer to the recent budget announcement, and that will give us some general idea in overall terms. And what that has identified is £4.8 billion for local government. How far that is new money and how far it's part of existing spending powers is to be determined. But there are some elements of it which are clear. First of those is that there is the usual allowance for district council increases, which is expected to be up to 2% or £5. That's the maximum available to us. That we know that the business rates review, which was supposed to be next year, has been postponed for probably 2 years. So that, if we are fortunate and the high street and the city continues to thrive, means that there should be some additional growth around business rates, which would be welcome. And it means that we are not expected to see the fair funding review taking place as well, which we had anticipated a negative. The two areas where we definitely had anticipated a reduction at the time of writing this report are in respect of new homes bonus, because that was a one-off funded item from last year. And something which was new for last year was called lower tier services grant. Both of those items they weren't entirely closed out. So there's a possibility that if an element of the £4.8 billion finds its way to lower tier level, then we should perhaps see some reinstatement of that. But there is no other mechanism for government through revenues support grant anymore to provide funding directly to district council. So I expect it would come through one or two of those areas. So it's possibly a more positive picture than at the time that the report was written. In overall terms, we'd anticipated a reduction in funding for those reasons, no new homes bonus and grants. The picture has been slightly obscured, of course, because of the COVID period in which we saw a significant reduction in income, and there is some time for that to recover. Car parking in particular has been affected. It was very interesting to note that for the first time in a long time this morning, I couldn't get into one of our car parks because it was full, which shows that perhaps there is a return to the city, and that is bringing in additional costs. So I'm more positive about that returning to its former position, but it will take a while. Some other indicators suggest that the city is attracting interest from tourists, from visitors. The recent Light Night Festival was very positive, that people are interested, and the feedback regarding bookings for the forthcoming Christmas fair has been very positive too. So there are quite a lot of indicators which are perhaps a slightly improved position on where we were when I spoke to you all at the all members. But we shall see. The settlement isn't expected until mid-December, and that will give us a better indication of the future. It's likely to be once again only a one-year settlement. We get a longer-term settlement like we used to, but that's probably without putting any numbers against anything, where we are at the moment in terms of.
Thank you for that answer. Do we have any?
Just for clarity, I raised the issue a few seconds ago. Can I please seek some assurance that my request for improved toilet facilities at St John's Cemetery will be on consideration for the agenda at the next meeting under the budget proposals as requested? Obviously, it'll be for that meeting to determine it rather than today, but I'd like to ask the committee for that consideration to take place. And if you can discuss that now rather than any other business, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's raised, and if you want to follow up with an email to officers as well, with and it will be looked at with all the others and come back to January, and then that's where we decide what we put through to PNR, and then obviously PNR will decide what ultimately approved. Have any more on this item? So we'll be happy to note items 1.1 and 1.2. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Shane. So now we're on to agenda item 6, the consolidation of Worcester City Council off-street car parking orders. So Gareth's going to come to the table.
John, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity for allowing me to speak this evening. This report outlines the recommendation to consolidate all car parking orders into one, including the new EV charge bays at SMG, St Martin's Gate Car Park. I go straight into the recommendation. The recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of the report, in particular the proposal to introduce parking arrangements for the designated electric hybrid vehicle bays at St Martin's Gate Car Park. The committee approves the undertaking of a 21-day consolidation exercise in respect to the draft Worcester City Council off-street parking places order 2021. And the committee delegates authority to the corporate director of operations, homes and committees in consultation with chair and vice chair into any changes required following consultation feedback received. Brief background is that currently the council have in place 4 car parking orders that span over 12 years. It should be pointed out that this report is not recommended any changes in pricing, neither up or down, so there'll be no increase or decrease. The new charge points are actively being used at St Martin's Gate car park presently. But we're currently providing this for free, but this consolidation of car parking orders will include the formulation or through conclusion of car parking orders for the pricing strategy. Currently, we have two different types of charge points, which are rapid, which is up to 50 kilowatts, and fast, which is either 7 or 22 kilowatts. The rapid charge points are more likely to be used like local businesses, and the fast charging points are more likely to be used by those intended to stay longer within the city. It is proposed to provide 1 hour's free parking to incentivise the active use of rapid the vehicle bays with a maximum of 1 hour stay. Also, no limits on the amount of times in which the vehicle can return to a rapid bay. It is proposed to apply the standard current rate of tariff at St Martin's Gate. Those actively looking to use the fast bays with a maximum of 4 hours, after which they'd have to move their vehicle into a more suitable bay within the car park. Vehicles utilising the fast bay will not be permitted to return the same day within the current day, same bay within the current day. The pricing for the rules and regulations for pricing within the bays, the electric vehicle bays, are from 7 AM to midnight, and all users must adhere to the maximum stay rules of either 1 hour for the rapid charge points, 4 hours for the fast charge points. It's also noted that disabled badge users will be able to utilise their vehicles within these bays, but the same rules will apply throughout the day. So in order to formalise the use of these charge bays, an existing car parking order would need to be amended or a new one created. It makes good sense to incorporate these required changes into one consolidated car parking order, which then can be updated when required. The preferred option is that the report recommends that the public consolidation exercise is undertaken in respect to a single consolidation off-street car parking order that covers Worcester City Council car parks, which have accumulated over the course of 12 years. Having one order will provide the opportunity to officially update the order to bring it into line with the current parking payment options and to formalise arrangements for the use of new EV bays at St Martin's Gate car park. The alternative options that have also been considered is to keep standard tariffs for EV bays with no incentivisation. This may risk undermining the use of the bays and impact on the council's play within the carbon neutral position. Another option may be to subsidise parking for a longer stay than required to reach full charge. The introduction of this may discourage the use of the people buying EV cars. Thank you, Chair. I'm willing to take some questions.
Okay, Andy?
You know, I don't understand this. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Just help me with it. There's two things, really. The terminology, this report recommends a public consolidation exercise. Can you just tell me what that means? And just to put it into context, I can't get from the report how popular or unpopular charging points are, and whether, when compared with similar towns, similar cities, we're behind the curve, whether we're being ambitious enough or whether we're in front of the curve. I'd be very grateful for a bit of a head up on that.
I'll start off with the last question. We've recently just had a report through from Ruth to say that we've had positive feedback from the users themselves, saying it's a great initiative and they wish that other cities had as many charge bays as we have at Worcester. With regards to your mention of the public consolidation exercise, I'll speak to my corporate director to get some clarity on that.
Yeah, I just don't know quite what it means. Yeah, but
yeah, I'll pick that one up if you don't mind. Because we're seeking to consolidate the 4 existing car parking orders into one, legally we're obliged to undertake public consultation. If the changes that we were proposing were inconsequential, then we're directed not to. But because we're introducing a parking sort of fee and charge around the EV, then our legal colleagues have directed us to carry out the public consultation to meet that legal deal. So that's the reason why that recommendation is.
thank you, Chair. So I'm getting from this that we have got decent provision, but we're probably ambitious to have even. We've got a spread. We're going to bring this all together. That involves what doesn't involve the consultation, but that's what we're being asked to.
So advice from legal colleagues is that we are introducing strict vehicle charging bay. We don't have that would require a public consultation.
Yeah, we got there.
Thank you, Chair. There's three points I wish to make. 2 of them are questions and one is a suggestion. First of all, I assume, and I'm no expert in this, and I sort of seek guidance and information, that the charging machines we are installing or have installed are suitable for all kinds of electric vehicles. I know there are some issues with some electric vehicles have different charging mechanisms. And I just want to make sure that we're covering all bays. And secondly, I don't see anything in the report, unless I'm mistaken, I've missed it, about how we can encourage local taxis to have electric charging, especially within our own car parks, as suggested. It's something which we've looked at in the past and encouraged, and I do wonder whether there is scope within this kind of report for assisting taxis to transfer, the taxi fleet must look to transfer to charging vehicles by allowing them to charge free of charge within car parks, which would be a tremendous benefit. But the third point I raise, and it's I suppose more of a political point, this is all very well and good for the city centre, but the rest of the city is going to have significant problems and is going to continue to have significant problems because the county council still refuses to allow any on-street car parking, any on-street car charging machines to be installed, which means 2,000 people who are within a 5-minute walk of St John's Church can't have an electric vehicle because they've got no off-street parking provision. And I do wonder whether this is an opportunity for us to put some pressure upon the county council to change their policies and to allow on-street charging to take place, maybe through gullies, and we could support that as a pilot scheme somewhere through charging cable gullies to allow that to happen, because it's very good and very sensible to do what we're doing here, but there's a lot of people in Worcester who are going to be left behind, who will not be able to transfer to electric vehicles because the county council are not allowing them to charge their vehicles. And we've got to address that issue and do it quickly because the problems are only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Chair, thank you. Just in respect of the Councillor Udall's first question, I'm not aware that our charge points are restricted to any particular vehicle. And the last couple of weeks that I've been driving in and out to St Martin's Gate, I've seen a plethora of different types of vehicles using them. But we will double check that point. And if the answer is different, I will let committee members know. The second point around taxis, Councillor Udall sat on our task and finish group in respect of taxis. We currently have 3 or 4 taxis on our fleet which are electric, and there was some conversation around how we can encourage taxi drivers to make the shift. And I think we agreed that given the impact that the pandemic had on the taxi trade, probably now wasn't the right time to drive that conversation. But pleasingly, we've held our first taxi forum meeting this evening for a long time. So we now have a group that we can start to engage with and understand the challenges around that. And absolutely, for those taxis that are currently electric, then they are more than willing to utilise our asset. And in respect to the final point, I'd sort of direct members to the work that we're doing around the air quality task and finish group recommendations. And one of the pieces of work that Ruth and colleagues have undertaken is a bit of a mapping exercise around where where there is potential within the city for on-street charging, and based on where people would have difficulty in installing charge points of their own within the domestic setting. And we are hoping at some stage to meet up with public health colleagues and have that conversation, because I know that it is something colleagues at public health county are very interested in.
Thank you, Lloyd. Louise?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate Richard's point. I think it's pretty atrocious that our county council refused to allow on-street car parking charging. I think they're taking away car parking left, right and centre from residents, and they finally declared a climate emergency, yet they're not doing very much to mitigate the impact of congestion in Worcester City. But secondly, I wonder if we could come back to this report, because I don't think any of us have a full copy of the draft order. Myself and I think Richard are both missing every other page from the order, so I don't think it's a good idea to continue with this until we've got the full pages and we can all the order.
I think yeah. That's what. Firstly, apologies for.
Yeah, but apologies for that. I think those who've got a paper copy of the agenda might find that you haven't got a complete set of the pages. I'll ask my colleague to go and do that. If anybody else is missing the same, more copies done. I know some of you have obviously got your agenda online. If you want to pause for a couple of minutes until my colleague's back with that, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, point of order or clarification, Chair. I understand that order basically is the legal document that carves out space for our scheme of parking charges and regulations in the city. Is there intended to be with this report any details of what those charges and time allowances would be? Because otherwise, I think that legal document in itself isn't very informative to us, judging what we're implementing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Chair, we've tried to cover off the headlines within the covering report. The actual draft car park. So there shouldn't be any discrepancy. There shouldn't be anything in the record. But that is the legal document.
Okay, can you direct me to where the actual charges are then, and the actual periods of time and locations, etc.? I didn't think they were in that document when I went. Only skim it. There's a schedule at the end. I see it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
But if I understand correctly, this changes, it's just consolidating 4 into 1. So we're not actually changing anything, but also being able to, apart from introducing structure. Richard?
Yeah, on the basis of what we've been told, I think we can probably go ahead and agree what's on here, as long as we can have the paperwork sent out to us, if not today, at a later stage. So if there are any immediate issues or concerns, we can wave a flag at you and say, hold, stop, let's think again and do something. But in doing so, I would and it's clear there's cross-party support for what I'm about to say. It may be worthwhile as actually making a formal protest to the County Council as well under this report. Adding, if I may, an amendment to 1.4, calling upon the County Council to reconsider their policy on on-street parking charging and to consider a pilot scheme which will include gullets to allow that to happen in Worcester. We are having to respond because they're not responding. And I think it's an opportunity for us to be united in this and with a front which we can call cross-party coalitions and cooperations and work together to achieve something which is useful from the County Council.
You want to say it again?
1.4, that the Environment Committee calls upon the County Council to consider a pilot scheme for on-street parking charging machines to be installed with the use of gullies within Worcester.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Chair, I think, what some recommendations for committee to debate, but what I can offer, if that is helpful, is to seek clarity from the County Council on what their current position is. It's something that I know was going to be discussed as part of the air quality report back to Licensing and Environmental Health Committee in December, if that is helpful.
If you're happy to move with Lloyd's
Obviously, Chair, I have information from another place that the Cabinet member responsible for highways has indicated that there will be no consideration of on-street parking and charging machines, and I think that's something which we as a City Council can quite clearly disagree with and think it's something which we can lobby for change, even if it's only a pilot scheme to test the process somewhere in the city where cables can be attached to vehicles through a cable gully safely and securely and see how it works. I would more than welcome suggestions in areas of St John's, McIntyre Road, for instance, where there is very little on-street parking, off-street parking facilities for residents, where this could be tested and to see whether it's worthwhile pursuing elsewhere. It's a suggestion which I would ask the committee to consider.
I would rather the committee took a measured view on this. 1/3 of households don't have off-street parking, and it's not illegal to put a cable across the path. Now, you wouldn't have got that from our conversation. So what I'm saying is it's not the most informed conversation. If we want to look at matters, then let's just look at them. Heaven forbid that anybody. I'm sure they're not, but if they are doing that for advantage, it's not really. I mean, let's be a bit more measured in this. And if we're going to make a recommendation such as that, then let's do it from an intelligent position.
Thank you, Andy. Has anyone else got anything to say?
Yeah, I've got two things I'd like to raise, but I'll stay on this topic for the time being because it's one of them. I'm contacted by residents asking about on-street parking because they live somewhere where they can park off the street. Like to move to electric vehicle. I think it's reasonable, even if we don't want to try and provide on-street park chargers, to at least have a method available or a mechanism available where gullies can be installed to allow that to be done safely from someone's home. That would seem entirely reasonable to me. And I know the LGA have recently put out some information on this. They've acknowledged that getting infrastructure on streets can be hard for chargers, but for just gullies and ways of routing cables safely, that doesn't seem like an unreasonable request. As a member of the Environment Committee, I'm being addressed by residents asking for support with this. There must be some way for us to look for some reasonable middle ground where we can facilitate this for residents. I don't know, Chair and officers, what might we do to try and open up this conversation again because residents are asking?
Louise?
Thanks. I'm going to have to disagree with Andy on this one because I am one of that supposed third of people that don't. Well, it may not come as a surprise to you, Andy, but I am going to disagree. I don't have off-street parking at my house, like a lot of other people don't. A huge number of people that live in my ward don't have off-street parking. They have to park on the streets. And like Tom, I get regular correspondence from people asking how they can have electric vehicles. Our government has said that we are going to be moving away from petrol and diesel vehicles, yet our county council refuses to allow us to put in place the infrastructure to deal with that change. And it may not be illegal to run a cable across a path, but it's certainly a trip hazard and it could cause injury and accident. And I do think it is about time we want off-street chargers.
Can I just suggest, we've done a lot of talking about this. There's been a proposal. I think it would be wise if you asked for a second. we have a vote on it. But procedure, all of the discussion around has been fairly nebulous. When there's a proposal, be a second, obviously, feeling in the room, get somebody to second.
Do I have a seconder?
I need to have clear resolution. The thing, I'm being told that the county council have said this, and the county council said, no, I don't accept that. Now, I'm not saying it's not true, but I don't accept it because it's like a barroom chat. I need to have that evidenced. Now, I do know that there's some very good work being done, for instance, in Oxfordshire, where they're doing just this. They're trialling, putting things under the path. And I think that sounds very sound and very sensible. And so, I mean, but that's a more measured approach, Richard. It's just saying the county have said to you, perhaps, that they won't do it. And I'm sure you're not telling a fib or anything, but it's hardly evidence to come out with here and say that. I mean, you need to substantiate it with something. And a more rational, I would say, a more rational thing would be to make it clear in your motion that the city council is extremely keen on forwarding zero carbon, and we encourage the county council to do whatever it can to do that, and ask them to look at where there are schemes such as Oxfordshire and whether we can learn from those. That would be a more measured approach, I suggest.
I prefer if we can have a more neutral amendment. If we can go down.
I thought it was.
So if we can.
I thought it was a politically neutral amendment, Chair. It's been moved and seconded. All I'm asking for is for the county council to allow us to have a pilot scheme within Worcester, which will incorporate the use of cable gullies in the pavement, so cables are not stretched across the pavement. So it does become safe. And I'm volunteering areas in St John's or anywhere else in the city where this can be tried and tested. If they allow us to do that, that will give us an opportunity to support it, fund it, and even encourage it to happen. And if it works, great, we can spread it out. If it doesn't work, we reverse it and change. Until we pilot it, we won't know whether it will happen or not. So it's a simple amendment which really will allow that to happen.
I'm going to ask Shane for some advice here, because this is a report about off-city street parking, including charging points off-street, and we're just getting an amendment that's taking it in a different direction. So I'm just going to ask for advice whether it's actually a valid
Yeah, if it helps, the purpose of an amendment should be either to leave words out, or to leave some words out and insert others, or to try to insert words. I think perhaps take a view as whether amendment to bring forward something different to what is on the order paper is appropriate circumstance. Seconded, but there's a difference between amending what is on your recommendation and introducing.
Just going to take a break and check this constitutionally.
To work from, and Richard is happy with it.
was, and I'm more than happy to accept that our officers will go away and discuss with the County Council the issues which we've raised tonight and bring a report back to our next meeting on the outcome of those discussions, and so we can have a proper informed discussion on the future of what I've suggested, which is pavement gullies for electric cables for charging, and we can then discuss it in detail with an informed debate at the next meeting. If that helps, I'm more than happy to withdraw my amendments and ask for that to be done. And obviously recorded in the minutes as such.
Thank you.
Help from me, Chair.
Are we back live?
Chair, if it helps from me, I fully support that as an approach.
Yeah, thank you. We are back live, yeah? Yeah, cool. Okay, so Tom?
Chair, if just for clarity, as a point of order for the benefit of the minutes, that request is then for Lloyd to take away three points to county. The first being clarification of their policy. The second to be to express this committee's desire to support residents in adopting off-street parking. And the third to ask them to provide some permitting policy or enabling mechanisms for that to happen. And that he would then report back to this committee on the outcome of those discussions at our meeting in February.
So if we can minute that Lloyd's taking that action to speak to county, and we'll bring it back to a committee in the new year. And also I'm more than happy for myself and Tom to, on top of it, in our vice chair and vice chair meetings. Okay. On that basis, are we?
I do apologise for causing chaos, but it is my speciality.
We all wanted a quick meeting, didn't we? I think it was just to allow time for the photocopying. So if there's no more speakers on agenda item 6, are we happy to approve the recommendation? So note the contents of the report, approve the undertaking of the 21-day consultation, and delegate authority to the corporate director, chair and vice chair to make any changes following consultation. Show of hands on this one, please. Yep. So, awesome. Moving swiftly on to agenda item 7, the review of the delivery and management of allotments. Over to Phil.
Thank you, Chair. The report has got 3 recommendations. First being the note the content of the report, and in particular the consultation feedback, which is shown in Appendix 1, the summary. Approve the proposed changes to the draft tenancy agreement, which is shown at Appendix 2. And recommends to the Income Generation Committee the approval of changes to the concession regime set out within the report in preparation for 2022-2023 charges. So just to give a brief background, the review of the delivery and management of the allotments commenced last year. There's been progress going on. We've involved the National Allotment Society, as you recall. And in May, it was approved that we had the appointment of an allotment officer in relation to the management of allotments. And I'm pleased to report that that recruitment has been completed and the new allotment officer commenced. Will be sort of working through and starting to get people. In July, committee noted that we should further engagement with stakeholders, particularly in relation to the tenancy agreement, the review and update of that document, the concession regime, that we review that, and that we also look at the roles of the site representatives and of the forum. We held. We consulted, we sent out documents to all existing allotment holders and to allotment holders who are currently on the waiting list, prospective allotment holders. And we had some quite good feedback. We had 163 survey responses and we had 47 drop-in sessions at the Guildhall. We also sort of added an engagement profile on the forum. So we propose that we regular engagement meetings with residents. We asked a number of questions around the tenancy agreement. And in the main, it was welcomed. It was seen as being a significant improvement, and it was a very positive feedback on that. And as we requested, we also got quite a lot of comments from people who wanted to point out things that they felt were impractical or could be improved or that we'd missed. And it was good because that was the feedback that we actually wanted. One of the main concerns that came out were there was a concern that some of the changes might be retrospectively enforced, that we'd put forward a proposal whereby we could look at water charges in the future. People were concerned about that and wanted clarity. What the impact about that, how fair that could be. Social gatherings was another area that was sort of in the top comments, and people talking about the fact that they meet families, they meet fellow plot holders, that that it's good for health and well-being. And then there's a range of other things such as tree heights, responsible weed control using membranes and plastics. So we obviously took all that on board. We asked for, did anybody want any additions or suggestions to the tenancy agreement? There was a few comments. There wasn't a massive response to that. There was whether we should introduce rules for polytunnels, site representative elections could be better communicated, and potentially the size of ponds. And again, horticultural polypropylene was put forward as something that we should let people use. In terms of the concession regime, 80% of people felt it was fair or very fair. In terms of the role of the allotment officer, this was seen as being very positive, with over 50% of respondees saying it was beneficial and saw it as a single point of contact for the site representative. In terms of the site representatives, they saw our proposals as being very supportive, and also that they recognised the crucial role that site representatives play. In terms of the allotment engagement meetings and the forum, the development of the engagement meeting again was widely welcomed. The biggest comments we had that we should maybe open them not just to the site representatives, but we should maybe invite the wider allotment holders so that more people can attend and get involved in that. It seems quite a positive forum. And in terms of the forum, there was sort of limited sort of feedback on that. People felt that it had a role, and other people felt that actually opening up the engagement to a wider audience was probably a more positive way, taking some of the social benefits forward and some of the environmental benefits forward. So overall, I feel that the consultation was a really positive engagement, and we've got lots of positive feedback. Or it's with that in mind that I put forward the three.
Thank you, Phil, and I want to thank you and officers. Extensive public consultation exercise, one of the most comprehensive ones that we've done for some time, and it's very well attended and by public plot holders and potential plot holders. I'll put to the floor now. Any questions?
Not a question, but this is strangely putting this at the start of the debate, but I will do so, so I think it'll inform it. Looking at this, I mean, I'm aware of the tremendous work that's been done with people who have picked over this and found things that are either substantial or necessary, topographical, it's tremendous work. And I'm confident that what we've got, particularly on the agreement, is a lot better than what we started with. But it does strike me that we're going to be going on forever with this. And so I would ask if, before we start the debate, if I don't know how the numbers work, but whether we could add to this that we delegate to the vice chair, chair, and the necessary officer to carry out any amendments, clarifications that we feel necessary in our debate, so that we don't go on forever, basically.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Andy. And obviously, we've had further comments as well, which have highlighted some things that could do with a bit of tidying up. So do I have a seconder for that, Louise? So we need to do a vote on the amendment. Yeah. So just for clarification, then we just want to put in an amendment there that basically says if there's any minor amendments for an action, if there's any minor amendments needed to the tenancy agreement as published, with the agreement with myself, Vice Chair, and Lloyd, that we're delegated authority to make any minor changes. So are you happy to take a vote on that? Those in favour? Okay, carried. So should we, any more questions now on the paper for Phil? None? That's excellent news. So if there are no further questions, are we happy to move to the vote for the recommendation as amended? Favour? Everyone?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Phil. Okay.
Should you thank, I don't know if it was present, but should you thank those who have done so much work outside?
Absolutely, exactly. And yeah, so as well as all the officers, and that is, it's obviously a mention to all the residents and plot holders that contributed to the consultation and spent their time offering improvements. Sorry? Okay, so on to agenda item 8, the public bin investment programme. So Tim, would you like to come to the table?
Okay, thank you, Chair. This report is the result of a lengthy consideration of the current litter bin provision across the city to achieve a number of improvements. The bin provision has been evaluated in every ward and includes changes to bins based on feedback from members as a result of the engagement process conducted through August and September. It was recognised that there was a need to get improvements on the ground as soon as possible. The Policy and Resources Committee in June approved an allocation of £75,000 for enhanced public waste collection services, which included £48,000 for litter bins. Following our initial analysis of bin provision, to sort out immediate problems and consolidate multiple bins at the same location, it was determined that up to £80,000 would be needed. So it was agreed to fund a further £32,000 reallocated from other environmental operations elements. The preferred bin type is shown in Appendix 1 of the report and was chosen by the Street Scene Task and Finish Group following a procurement exercise and evaluation. The style is of a cabinet containing a wheelie bin and is suitably branded up. This style gives an increase in capacity over traditional litter bins. The improvements are proposed in 2 phases, using our in-house minor works unit, with phase 1 starting now and phase 2 from next April, with this rollout taking up to 3 years. However, we will strive to reduce this time period where we can in order to reap the benefits of the improvements more quickly. Phase 1 of the scheme is to consolidate multiple bins in the same location by replacing them with one larger cabinet-style bin. Phase 1 also takes on board feedback from members requesting additional bin provision to resolve more immediate problems. The 132 bins for phase 1 are due to be delivered this month. The works team are currently checking locations and building bin foundations where required. By looking at the bottom of the chart in Appendix 2, we can show that phase 1 will increase the number of bin locations by 23. This is comparing the totals in the first orange column with the first green column. And also that capacity available for public use has gone up from approximately 12,000 litres to 26,500 litres. And that's comparing the columns in the third orange column and the last green column in the report. As part of phase 1, we'll be conducting a communications exercise to let residents know about the changes, including the message that both bagged dog waste and litter can be placed in the same bin. Phase 2 of the scheme will bring the bulk of improvements, including the expansion of public recycling, to areas where we believe recycling will be mainly generated, such as play areas, green open spaces, and high footfall pedestrian routes. This will extend the provision of recycling bins further out from the city centre and Premier Parks. Also, as part of phase 2, we will need to refurbish 52 poor quality litter bins currently in Premier Parks. The chart in Appendix 3 shows the whole scheme, including phase 1. So this is where we are planning to be when the whole project is done. In summary, there will be an increase in the number of bin locations by 39. And again, by comparing the totals in the first orange column with the first green column. And there'll be an increase in capacity to deposit waste and recycling from about 63,100 litres to about 147,600 litres when the scheme is complete. This is a significant increase. We have estimated that it will take 3 years for our minor works unit to swap over from the old bins to the new bins. The advantage of using the minor works unit is local knowledge of locations across the city and their ability to install around other essential and project work. As part of this analysis, each ward has 2 plans, one showing current bin provision and another showing provision following implementation of the whole scheme. The proposed bin allocation remains flexible and minor amendments can be accommodated for urgent issues. As regards the financial implications of the scheme, for phase 1, this report recommends a supplementary estimate of £80,000 to this year's capital programme towards improvements to be carried out this financial year. This would then enable £80,000 to be released for revenue projects subject to Policy and Resources Committee approval. For phase 2, the costs have been calculated as £323,000 over 3 years. And this sum will be included in the capital programme as part of the budget setting process for the next financial year. In summary, the new starter bin gives us a significant increase in capacity for public use, averting the need for multiple small bins in one location. There will be a reduction in the manual handling of sacks by the collection teams, a reduction in the usage of single-use plastic sacks. There will be an expansion of public recycling and a smart refresh look to the service. But what we have aimed to do as part of this project is to ensure bins are in the right location, more locations are covered, and there's better messaging on the bin by stating that it can be used for both litter and bagged dog waste. And we're also removing poor quality stock, such as the open top bins, which can be prone to gull scavenging. Back to you, Chair. Any questions?
Thank you, Tim. Major step forward and in our bin capacity. I mean, 134% increase, 70,000 litres to 140,000. This is substantial increase in capacity, and I think all of us as ward councillors have had over the years complaints of overflowing bins, and hopefully this will drastically reduce the occurrence of overflowing bins and the open post-mounted bins that often are just a temporary store of rubbish being drastically reduced. So thank you, Tim, and I'll now open the floor to any questions anyone might have.
Very quickly, is our monitoring system sensitive enough to be able to register any difference?
We're talking about the monitoring system in the city centre bins.
We get a quarterly update. I'm just wondering about quality control. You know, putting all this money into it. We don't want bag packet type results. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to tell from the stats that we get whether it's been effective.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Chair, I think Tim knows this far better than me, but we have a range of KPIs, I think, ranging from complaints received, number of overflowing. I'm fairly comfortable that our current monitoring regime, auditing regime would
If I can just come in there, Chair, yeah. The place teams, which are in their places all the time, will be our eyes and ears to the success of this scheme as well. So we shall get feedback directly from them as well as the collection teams who empty the bins.
Neil, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yeah, thanks to everyone behind the scenes working really hard on this. I know you've probably been annoyed by the amount of questions I've had, but you've always been really prompt and detailed. Really appreciate it. Bins is obviously a very public side of what the council does, and the fact that you've been on it every single time is much appreciated. The question I have is about the timescale. I mean, it says that if the work is retained in-house, it'll take possibly up to 3 years. I appreciate you also said that you're going to try to reduce that time period. Has there been any sort of investigation into what the cost would be if there were a bigger team involved in installing the bins, and whether and how quickly that would reduce the time involved? Or are we sticking to this? It's 3 years and we'll see how we can reduce it in-house.
We've estimated the project, or the phase 2 part of the project, will take about 36 weeks. We'll try and, knowing that the capacity of the works unit can be limited with other project work and so on, we will just try and work around other essential work that they have, so that when there are gaps in their workload, we can just head on and do other bins. I'm keen to use the works unit because it's what they know. They've done plenty of this before. They know the locations. So we'll just try and make sure that any spare come back on. We'll set out a proper programme for them as well, but any spare capacity, then they'll come back.
I think previously you mentioned about cycling the bins as well. Phased approach gives more. Bill, did you want to come in? Or?
Yes, just to add to what Tim said. We want to try and use the works unit because they are there for cost. Also allows a spread of capital. What we will be doing is obviously targeting the areas that need improvement. So the rollout will, as Tim said, detailed the right place, the right time. If there is a need to then push on, we could bring in third-party resources. But at this time, I think phased rollout is our works team actively employed and they do other work. So without sort of giving them enough work to do, they become less cost effective. Other work, so it's a balance of making sure workload, good quality of work, and controlling.
Tom?
Thank you. When we were discussing the individual ward plans, I flagged some local shops, and the perfectly reasonable response was that where those shops were being developed, in this case by platform, they would install bins in those areas. Really just a question of interest for me. Presumably we would still empty bins in areas. That's question one, is that true? And secondly, from the public's point of view, a bin is a bin, and they'd expect the same quality of hardware and the kind of consistency of look and feel and equipment across the city. Do we have a way of kind of providing that consistency and quality when other partners are installing those bins?
We do empty a number of what we call private bins across the city. So this is where other providers have installed bins as part of a development. But there are other bins don't empty because they're in more inaccessible locations. I think we have consulted with about bin provision, where we've provided to supplement their stock, then that's what we've done. I agree there's quality can be different depending on who provided them in the first place. Sorry, the second part of your question.
Yeah, it was, is there a way we can look at providing that consistency of bin quality across the city then? There are bins that are not originally installed by us, but it's in our interest, public's interest, for them to be of good quality.
Yeah, I mean, we know where all the bins are. I think it'd probably be a discussion with the provider first and foremost. The approach consistent, safe in the eyes of the public, we could work towards that, and I think we've done some of that work. Brickfields Park. Strange bins installed there. We're looking to rationalise.
Yeah, thank you. That's really excellent. I'm very aware of Brickfields. Carry on talking after this about how we might platform installing. Is it off at the pass? Sure that good quality, especially.
Do you have any questions? Done on the discussion? Are we happy to take a vote on the recommendations as printed, 1.1 to 1.3? All those in favour? Okay. Neil, was your microphone still? Cheers. Shall we move on to agenda item 9 now? The goal control report and recommendation for the work programme for next year. We have Mark from Worcestershire Regulatory Services.
Good evening, thank you, Chair. I've been asked to present the feedback on the work that we've undertaken over the last year, and also provide you with the proposals for next breeding season. Section 3 of the report provides the detail on the work undertaken this year. Figure 1 gives the figures on our interventions. And in addition, the text confirms that we, with 15 individual licence applications, we were successful to do nest, egg and chick removal, and 13 properties have been goal-proofed, working with the residents, so match funding that they can have that, that's security of not having girls on their property next year. And much of the work we've been doing this year has been collaborative, both in terms of action and funding. And the recent Goal Forum a couple of weeks ago, the feedback from that was the improvements the residents have seen have been significant and have been, for them as individuals, life-changing. And the number of service requests and complaints that we've received over the last 3 years have consistently dropped. That isn't in the report, but for reference, it was 44 in 2019, and this year it was only 23. Section 4 of the report, and at this point I'd also like to point out there is an error with the recommendation. Recommendation 1.2 refers to the work programme in section 3, but it's actually section 4. Apologies for that. The section 4 sets out the 2022 proposals from April onwards and provides an opportunity for us to capitalise on the successes that we've had this year and in previous years. It's a combination of proven methods and a systematic approach, primarily with non-lethal control, where we can, and where that isn't an option, then take tick removal, and complements the licensing application process we have to go through with Natural England. I won't go through each of the key actions, but they're there in section 4. Section 4.7, I will just go through. This is something that we haven't really done before. It's a proactive work in discrete locations where we feel that we could get optimum response, positive impact. These are sensitive locations where we've had complaints and issues about goals previous years. And we feel that it would benefit from the work that we've already undertaken in those locations because we've already got some goal proofing done at those places. It's primarily gull exclusion through steel cages, in mesh cages up against chimney stacks and in gullies, that kind of thing. There is reference to netting in a couple of locations. That's where we can't do anything else. Our only option is netting. But that's still not a certainty. It would be subject to engagement by the landowner in agreeing to match fund it and to ensure that maintenance checks would be done, and also that they would maintain it annually appropriately. And of course, it would only be undertaken if we had approved contractors doing it that did it properly for the appropriate size and fitting. Because I know there have been some issues in previous years. And as well as that, spikes, disturbance, and there's a couple of examples in there, agri lasers, and also the use of distress calls, and that's a company that's approached us and they want to trial the kit they've got. That it's an intelligent system that works with movement and disturbance by the gulls, and the idea being to try and demonstrate that that location isn't a good location for gulls to nest and breed, because they're colony breeders, obviously. And there's one location where that might work quite well. So we're looking to trial that with the company who owns a roof and also the company that supplies the kit. As well as that, there's nest egg removal in those roofs where we can't do anything else, and complementary hawking the area. So that's in brief summary, the report. Hopefully the report has sufficient detail for you. It also gives us some flexibility to do proactive work as well as reactive work. But if I bring you back to the recommendations, 1.1 is to note the work we've undertaken this year, and 1.2 to approve the programme for 2022 as detailed in section 4 of the report, with the recommendation of additional funding being supplied so we can undertake that work. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any questions? Simon?
I've got one or two questions. So shall I do all this in one go? First of all, on page 40, I'm very pleased to see paragraph 491 about the designing out of gull nesting opportunities. Quite a few years ago now, I think it was back in and this was one of our recommendations. I do hope that with this document that will actually happen, because it does seem absolutely sensible thing to do, that especially in the city centre, any change in a building which requires planning should be conditioned on the inclusion of gold mechanism. There's in section 5, we've got end of season nest removal. The question I have is, we know that a lot of the buildings in the city centre particularly are owned by, who knows, who knows who owns the building that Marks and Spencer's occupy. I don't suppose any of it. Doubt if it's Marks and Spencer's. The point is, we have to get permission, presumably, to go up on the roofs of those buildings from the title holder, or possibly the occupier of the ground floor. How easy or difficult is it to get that permission? Because if we can only get access to a small proportion of the city, then the goals are smart. No, they're not. On a similar vein, and this was another of the recommendations years ago, recommended publishing of nesting. By publishing, I mean putting that in the public domain, because with the point in mind that public complaints have gone down. Possibly that's just because people have lost the will complaining about it. The prevalence of the public, I would have thought, would engage with that sort of report, and certainly around the table, I'm sure we all know. So that's something which could be a dynamic document, helpful with the input of all of us and the general public. A lot more easy to compile it than employing a limited number of people to go around the city. The last point, I just couldn't understand what this paragraph meant. It's 532 on page 41, about the widespread cull would be highly unlikely to work. Behaviour of gulls. At the time of a bird's first breeding year, if a male normally returns to the natal, if it were a female bird, it would choose a different colony. But I couldn't get it out of my mind. How are they going to do that if they've just been? So I think I'm missing something there. So if I can just have that explained, that's it anyway.
Thanks, Simon. I'd just like to say a bit before passing over to the experts, but having been on a few walks with Gordon, the gull officer, he knows virtually every landlord, every building owner, every resident that has problems. So in terms of getting access and permission, he's just got a mate. He's just worked so hard getting all the contacts. All the access points, which routes have got access, which ones need to. It's really impressive. And I would add that you are aware of gulls and gulls nesting. Do report all that information into Gordon, and I'll just offer my interpretation of 5.2. And I think the point is that they're not there to be culled, because they go away and then come back once they're culled. So I think portion of the staff having adolescent years elsewhere. Back. So I think we're trying to.
Still don't understand if you cull them.
But to be fair, I think in terms of the context of the report, it's not really relevant because it's not so obvious. So I think it's just more information. But I'll pass over to Mark and he can tell me if I'm right on that.
Thank you, Councillor. In general, yes. In terms of nest removal, it's one of the things we're not proposing this year. It's a nice thing to do, and it does help reduce the likelihood the birds will come back to that roof. It makes it harder for them to breed. And as the Chairman has said, that we do know a lot of the landlords around the city and have got a good working relationship either with the tenants, if not the landlords themselves, have been able to get in. In terms of publishing a map of nesting sites, we've effectively got that in our records. I don't think there'd be any benefit in publishing that because there's certain individuals who know they've got a gun on their property and have struggled to tackle it and deal with it. And we still have to work within the law, and there's certain requirements of that. And so there's not always an easy win solution. And with that in mind, there are large areas of the city that came out from the Gull population survey that have large numbers of gulls that we don't have complaints about. So we don't look at those areas primarily unless we have an issue there. We're focusing where we've got negative impacts and where we can find public health and safety harm, because that is only in those locations where we can get a license to take lethal control, so nest egg or chick removal. And by doing that, we're demonstrating to Natural England, we're focusing where we can work within the law, we're taking a responsible approach as an authority, and we are focusing our areas on the public good and where we can make the most impact on residents. And your final point in terms of the 5.3.2, apologies if I haven't made that clear. So if you were to cull all the birds in the city, which is an illegal act to do that, but say you did this year, next year you'll get the birds that bred 3-4 years ago returning this coming, the next season. You'd also, and they would primarily be the females that would be coming, and you'll be getting females from other colonies around that would be coming back, coming in, as well as the males that bred in this city. So you'd have to be doing it for a number of years and doing it in all the neighbouring colonies as well to prevent that mixing of the females coming in and the males returning. I hope that I've answered that. I know.
Thanks. Yeah, that answers the point. So the best we can really do is hope to displace our population to some of the neighbouring counties. They're very welcome.
Tom?
Yeah, just a couple of points. First of all, Chair, I had to smile when you mentioned the adolescent birds have gone elsewhere. I had a vision of them having loud parties and slamming doors somewhere else and being a nuisance elsewhere. But I want two points. First of all, a success story in this area. I've been working with platform housing for some time with the problems which they had experienced with gulls on the roofs of the high-rise flats in St John's. This has now been resolved due to their action. They put some caging on the roofs and painted a lot of red paint there, which appears to have actually worked. Worked so much as they've displaced it to another area of St John's, but they're no longer on the high-rise flats where people actually live. So that is actually a success. But I do have a question about the landowners and business owners who do not choose to cooperate with gull control, who choose not to do anything when they're approached about a problem and choose not to support any kind of activity to control the problem. What powers do we have, maybe under the Environmental Protection Act or any other piece of legislation, especially if there's a risk to health? Can we serve any form of enforcement notices to require action on their behalf, on their part, to ensure that we can control the problem?
Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. In relation to those kind of scenarios, we don't have any powers. We don't have any legal duty either. We've found so far to date where we've identified a problem problem, we've been able to work with the landowner to either get them to work with us so they are contributing either financially or by action to solve the problem, or where they're not able to do that, we've undertaken it on their behalf. Because we've identified a public health and safety harm. If we don't identify that harm, then we can't do any lethal control, so nest egg or chick removal. But we can work with the landowner to do alternative actions. And in the main, most people have come forward. I think we've only had one nest where the owner has not wanted us to deal with it because they didn't agree with any action being taken, like the nest being there. But there has been other alternatives in the vicinity we've been able to do so that doesn't become a colony in itself.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just a question for information. What's the cost of the hawking activities that are planned for the next year, please?
6.1 table, deterrent hawking is £7,000. That's not the total cost of the hawking, but that is the City Council's contribution to it.
Okay, so
next financial year.
Someone else covers some of that cost as well. Who's doing that?
Depending on which location it is, it's either the business or in some cases it's been residents. Britannia Square, as an example, not this last year, but the previous year, the Residents Association signed up a number of the residents there and they match funded the hawking that year. And it was a big success from the Gulf Forum.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I got the impression from the report that hawking was a relatively weak deterrent. But you're saying it's been quite effective in those areas?
On its own, any of the measures would be not really strong, apart from gull exclusion itself, gull proofing itself. Hawking complements the other work. It helps to demonstrate it's not a safe environment for the birds to nest, creates that stress factor, which none of us perform well under stress. And it helps kind of drive home that it's not a good location. It won't drive off an established pair that know that they've got a good nesting location. What it will do is prevent other birds from coming in, and it will, if the other measures are successful, by the time they're laying their third or fourth clutch, because the others have been either removed or destroyed or whatever, they might give up the ghost because it's just not okay. And that's kind of anecdotal evidence we've had in Britannia Square and also in Lower Wick.
Okay, thank you. I have to say, overall, I've been in this committee for nearly 4 years, and I remember we've been cranking up our spending on goals, that's important because there are people being really badly impacted by them. But this can't carry on forever, and I'm keen that as you've indicated, we work smarter, not harder on these. It seems we need to focus in these key areas where people are really being impacted by the goals. And I think the idea of exclusion zones is a very good one. But I was a bit concerned to read in the exclusion zone works that, we will carry on with egg removal and chick relocation. When actually it's quite clear that caging, netting is perhaps got undesirable side effects, but caging is really effective. If you're telling us that all the property owners are cooperating and that caging works, why are we still planning egg removal in those exclusion zones? Why aren't we just caging them to utter exclusion and stopping all of these repetitive reactive measures and the lethal measures?
If I may, Chair, thank you. Because for some roofs it's not an option. It may be that we just can't physically get to that location, although there's less of those roofs now that one of our contractors has got a fancy new kit. But there are some large flat roofs, for example, where you don't have the chimney stack kind of scenario where you can easily fit a cage to prevent it from getting access there. So on those flat roofs, particularly if there's internal access, get up onto the roof, and the easiest thing is to do nest and egg removal. And we've been working with a number of businesses, and they've allowed us to go up and do that regularly, year in, year out. And what we're looking to do is try to encourage greater involvement and ownership of it amongst our residents and our businesses. So each element of this, of the proposals, is try to encourage that. The hawking is a really good example where we're working alongside businesses and residents. If the problem is big and bad enough for them, whether it hits the trigger for a lethal control or not, hawking can be undertaken. And that's something we don't have to wait for a license to do. We can do it. But we'd be looking to do it with the residents or the businesses.
Thank you. Can I continue? Is that all right?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. What's your view on how we get out of this loop? I mean, is this 40,000 this year that big push to get the caging on the roof, or or are there other things we could be doing that would allow us to avoid the cost and the invasion of these lethal measures in future years? I just want, I guess what I'm asking is, what's our strategy here that allows us to end up being more efficient and live at peace with the goals without having to keep spending more and more, or have very high repeated costs and deaths as a result?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. You're right, the focus has been to try and build on what we've done already. So where we've got goal proofing in place and we've still get complaints or issues around neighbouring roofs, or we've displaced them to neighbouring roofs, is then focus on those ones and leaving aside the large populations in the north of the city that aren't an issue. So it's focusing on those, but building on the work that we've done so that we're consistently ensuring that it's a unsafe place for the birds to nest, so that gull colonies can't establish. Part of the problem in Lower Wick is a colony has established there, and we're working with the business owner there to try and do more and more there, but putting the onus on the focus on them, so that there's a large portion of work that they're going to be doing this year that they haven't done before to try and take ownership of it themselves. And the 15,000 of WRS costs here is Gordon. It's Gordon going out there giving advice to try and empower those businesses and individuals to do those actions themselves. And you're right, gull exclusion is ideally ultimately what we're aiming to do, but in some locations we can't do that yet, and birds have been displaced to other places that we're then trying to do the gull proofing, and that helps support the license applications. It helps try to make certain gull exclusion zones more sustainable in the future without their active element.
Okay, thank you. Give other people a chance to talk.
If I just add a bit, certainly in discussion with Gordon about the hawking, he does believe it effective, and he has plans for the next year that fly the hawk from higher vantage points in the city, so that it's the hawk's higher than the seagulls to cause even more distress and act as a great deterrent. But I think also about the funding, ultimately that would be a sort of political decision in future years. But what we're recommending for next year, there's actually a lot of one-off items in there with the gull exclusions. So we'll be in a position to decide as councillors what we want to do in future years. Do we have? Sorry, and it's also worth mentioning. There's a lot. The money we're putting in is then being matched in lots of areas, so we're getting a lot more overall invested in the objective. Do we have any more questions on goals? No? Yep, so we move to recommendations. So can we have a show of hands, please, all those in favour as the recommendations printed? Is that everyone? Yep, that's carried. Marvellous. So we've done 10 and 11, so moving, I say swiftly on, to item number 12, the Quarter 2 performance reports. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. This is the half-year report, which is familiar in terms of its format. It covers the projects which are in the remit committee and the various performance indicators. Pleased to say there's only one which is showing as red, which is an indicator in relation to the time it's taken to clear some requests raised for clearance of grass a bit below the 85 working days, and no doubt will be improved in the next quarter. That, if there are any questions, officers are prepared to attempt to that.
Do we have any questions? Okay, so if we don't have any questions, then probably happy to note the report. Great, thank you. Marvellous. So we've covered the item we did have for A or B, so we haven't got any A or B to cover. So unless I'm mistaken, that is the end of the meeting. And thank you all very much for attending and participating. Good night.